Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack how a seemingly lazy episode naming convention secretly revolutionized TV memory retention and fan culture. So think about your absolute favorite television show for a second. Now think about exactly how you remember it. It sounds like a tiny, almost insignificant detail, but we're going to look at how a simple choice of words quietly changed how millions of people watched and remembered television. Okay, let's dive right into this by asking a super simple question. Imagine booting up your favorite episode of Friends, right? But instead of a catchy title like the one with the embryos, it simply says Episode 138. Honestly, would one of television's most iconic shows still feel the exact same if it just used numbers? Or what if it never gave us those unforgettable titles we all know so well? As you're going to see, that tiny little detail had a massive, totally unexpected impact. Now, notice the stark contrast between different eras of television here. On one side, you've got modern prestige dramas that love to use these elaborate, dramatic titles like The Betrayal or The Secret, or honestly, they just stick to rigid episode numbers. But on the flip side, we see the strangely simple pattern Friends adopted way back in 1994. And remember, this was well before the streaming era. You couldn't just open an app and instantly jump to your favorite moment. People were watching live broadcasts, checking physical TV guides, or just catching random reruns. And every single episode title began with the exact same phrase, The One. At first glance, sure, it kind of feels a bit lazy, but as we're about to uncover, that simplicity was actually a stroke of absolute genius.
Let's move to Section 1, Numbers versus Moments and the Psychology of Memory. Let's see how this builds into a brilliant psychological shortcut.
So here is the absolutely crucial point. Human brains are literally wired to remember stories and emotional moments, rather than abstract data like episode numbers. Numbers are, well, they're abstract. You don't naturally attach feelings to something like episode 86. But moments are deeply emotional. By ditching the numbers, Friends accidentally created one of television's most user-friendly naming systems by tapping directly into how our brains actually store memories. For instance, think about the one where Ross got high. Instead of trying to recall a random number, the title itself becomes an integrated part of your memory of the scene. You don't need to memorize a catalog or flip through a TV guide index. You just naturally describe what happened, and boom, the title does all the heavy lifting for you.
And look at this one, the one where everybody finds out. I mean, just hearing that instantly brings back a scene, a specific argument, or maybe even a debate you've had with your own friends for years. The title acts as a perfect memory shortcut, instantly triggering the exact emotional response of the episode.
Or consider the one with the prom video. This brilliantly illustrates how the format was simple enough to remember, but specific enough to instantly identify without needing to memorize a single thing. You hear those words, and the emotional resonance of that video playing on the TV screen in Monica's apartment just floods right back to you. Or, of course, the one with Unagi. By just describing what happened, these titles essentially function as perfect memory shortcuts. I mean, nobody ever says, hey, remember episode 86? No way. They say the title and the memory is instantly triggered. It completely changed the way people talked about the show. Moving right along to Section 2, Frictionless Word of Mouth and Pre-Internet Fan Culture. Let's explore how this alternate reality of naming impacted fan conversations before social media absolutely exploded. Look at how this acted as a frictionless communication tool. On one hand, you had typical TV discussions that sounded something like this. Which episode? Season 10, maybe episode 13. It's awkward, right? It halts the conversation. The magic entirely disappears. But on the other hand, did you see the one where Joey speaks French? Immediately, everybody knows. No searching, no confusion. Whether you were at school or hanging around the office, the title itself carried the memory and eliminated all the awkward friction of traditional TV discussions. Let's jump into Section 3, Anatomy of a Mini Hook and Protecting Surprises. Let's peel back another layer that people rarely talk about. Consider this brilliant concept of the mini hook. The title reveals just enough to pull you in with curiosity, acting as a little story engine, while expertly hiding the true surprise. Take a look at the one with the blackout, for example. It reveals a power outage. Okay, interesting. But the secret it protects is that Chandler gets trapped in an ATM vestibule. Or the one where everybody finds out. Someone learns a secret, but the hook is right there. Finds out what, exactly? The curiosity completely pulls you in without spoiling the actual payoff. Now, today, this kind of structure sounds pretty normal to us. But back then, this exact structure made the episodes feel incredibly approachable. It meant you could join the show late, catch a random rerun on television, and still feel completely included in the fun.
The title gave you the premise, pulled you in with that mini hook, and you were ready to just enjoy the ride.
All right, on to Section 4, brand consistency and a cultural legacy. So, how exactly did this tiny naming choice tie into the overall identity of the show itself?
Well, this actually points to a key reason for the show's massive success. There was no dramatic naming one week and no poetic metaphors the next week. Every single title belonged to the same grounded, comfortable universe. You knew you weren't entering an epic, dramatic saga. The consistency of the titles matched the exact identity of the show. It made it feel like you were literally just hanging out with your own friends. It was just another story. Just the one where something happened.
And once you realize that, you start seeing its influence absolutely everywhere. The one where has become a conversational storytelling format all of its own. Even people who have never fully watched the show understand this pattern and use it to reference everyday events in their own lives. That just shows how deeply this seemingly simple choice embedded itself into broader pop culture and internet storytelling.
So, what if we never got those specific titles? If the creators had used traditional titles like Unexpected Revelations or Six Friends and One Secret, honestly, the show would probably still be successful. The cast would still be iconic, and the jokes would still land. But the episodes would be so much harder to recall, conversations around the water cooler would feel way less natural. Ultimately, the show would lose one of its most comforting little signatures. That tiny naming choice was quietly, immensely powerful. Because sometimes the details we barely even notice become the exact reason something feels unforgettable. And honestly, maybe that's the most Friends thing imaginable. So I'm going to leave you with this. Which the one title instantly plays in your head? What episode memory just popped into your mind right now? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep looking out for those tiny details that change everything.